Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Produce Buzzers podcast. We are so happy you have joined us today, and I think you will be too after the show is over, because you will learn a lot about fresh fruits and vegetables, how to select and store them, how to prepare and cook them, and surprising facts about their history and origin. We hope it inspires you to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, not only for your health, but also for your delight and pleasure as you explore their amazing world of taste and delicious flavors. Eating more of them will transform your life in so many positive ways. So settle back, relax, and get ready for another delicious adventure with the Produce Buzzers. Greetings, Produce Buzzers podcast fans. Welcome to another delicious episode of the Produce Buzzers podcast. I'm Edwin Stepp, your host and executive editor of producebuzz.com. I'm joined once again by Teresa Nolan, the president and founder of Produce Buzz, along with Rick Stepp and Cynthia Benedetto, both contributing editors to Produce Buzz. Now, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, today we have a unique guest joining us on the podcast. She is a pioneer in the produce industry and one of the first women to establish her own business in that fresh produce world. We are honored and delighted to have Janice Honigberg on the show today. Janice is the founder and CEO of Sun Belle, a leading grower and importer of all types of berries, along with some other fresh fruit and veggie commodities. But she did not start in produce. After obtaining a BA degree from Yale in Latin American Studies and Philosophy and an MBA from Harvard Business School, she went to work in global commodity trading, working as a metals trader for Philip Brothers, which is now called Fibro. Certainly, her degree in Latin American Studies helped her as she focused on the Latin American markets for them. After that, she was hired by Louis Dreyfus Company, one of the world's largest merchants and processors of agricultural products. There, she was VP of a China trading company for U.S. food industry manufacturers. It took Janice only 4 years in the professional world to take the leap and start her own company. In 1986, she founded J.L. Honigberg and Associates and started importing raspberries from Chile. Over the next decade, the company continued to expand its growing and sourcing operations all across Central and South America and its distribution in North America. In 2002, she renamed and rebranded the company under the Sun Belle name and logo. I can attest personally to the fact that they have some of the sweetest and most flavorful berries on the market. Janice, welcome to the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you, Edwin, and all. I so appreciate this invitation and the opportunity to talk a little bit about my favorite subject, Sun Belle, and how I got started.
Great, yeah, and some of the and I know you're passionate about fresh fruits and veggies. That's what Produce Buzz is all about. We're trying to encourage people to eat more fresh fruits and veggies, and we get pretty passionate about it when we get together as a group. So let's start. I mentioned, or I said, and I may have said in error, that you didn't start out in the produce business. Did you have any connections to the produce business before you took this leap into the raspberry market?
No, I really didn't. I was exposed to international trade from an early age. My father had started his own business in his 20s, and he was basically an export management professional. He represented manufacturers of U.S. machinery and goods and exported them abroad. So I was always introduced to the business. And in fact, I was so eager to be part of his effort that I started in the typing pool, I think when I was in junior high, anytime I could. And then at 19, I worked in their marketing department and got to know the manufacturers and the markets. And then my father said, listen, if you're really interested in this business, you've got to get out in the field. So at age 20, I was sent to Caracas, Venezuela, to one of their offices. And it was quite the leap. And I was quite exposed to all kinds of marketing opportunities there, and including in the food business and in food and beverage equipment that they were selling.
Right.
But I did have some exposure to the produce industry. When I entered Harvard Business School, it was with the idea of being involved in international marketing and trade. And I decided very soon that agribusiness was my future.
Oh,
And when I took a very fascinating course, an agribusiness in developing countries course, and was exposed to several produce cases. And this was in the early 80s or late 70s, early 80s, 80, 81.
right.
So the industry, which was developing in Guatemala and Honduras at that time, was really fledgling.
Right.
And just a little detail here, I actually wrote a business school case on Standard Fruit's banana operations in Nicaragua. Standard Fruit is Dole, or was,
Right.
it is now called Dole. And they had banana operations in Nicaragua. And the idea of the case was to look at what happens to a multinational fruit company during revolution. And I interviewed Dave DiLorenzo in San Francisco for the case. And in fact, also, and of course, then ran into him much later when I was in the trade.
For our listeners who are mostly consumers, maybe don't know the trade, can you tell them who Dave is? He was.
Well, I think he was in charge of Dole for some years.
Yeah, right. So you were there very early as the Southern Hemisphere began to export more and more fruits and vegetables into the United States, because that's a fairly recent thing. Other than bananas, I know bananas have been coming for probably over a century, but the other fruits and vegetables that we see in the wintertime here that are summer fruits there, that's a fairly new business. Right?
It was, and that really was my starting point. I was working first at Philip Brothers and then at Louis Dreyfus, and had exposure to some of the soft commodities, which would be the food commodities. When I was at Louis Dreyfus, which is, as you mentioned, a large multinational, was a large grain trading company. Now they're hugely involved in processed frozen orange juice concentrate out of Brazil and so on. But I was involved in this Chinese trading company, which Louis Dreyfus owned, and we represented Gerber Baby Foods.
Oh, really?
Yes, they were interested in starting a plant in China.
Oh.
And these again
Rick, my uncle, and Rick's uncle worked for Gerber here in Western North Carolina for many years. I don't know if that was their main plant, but they had a big plant here for many years.
Right.
And he bought fresh fruits and vegetables for them to process into that. So,
oh my God. So part of the work that we did, in fact, was looking at the food supply in China, because they needed a secure, safe food supply to make their baby foods. And ultimately at that time, they decided not to invest in a plant in China because of those issues. But I was exposed to all the various fruits and vegetables, as well as many other food products in China, as part of my work there.
And on a global scale, of course, And that was the early 80s, right? So China was just starting to open up.
It was just starting. It was really very fascinating.
I spent 2 summers there and studying the language, 1983 and 1984. I can't speak it. I can't speak it. It was too tough, but I had a good time. But it was, the way it's changed from those days is just fascinating. But anyway,
I thought your main reason for being there was teaching English.
No, well, we did teach English a bit, but the main reason was to learn the language. So.
I thought it was a boondoggle excuse to get over there on, a paid, I'm like teaching English, wink, wink.
Well, we didn't get paid, but we had our way paid, so that's good.
Exactly.
Let's get back to Janice. I didn't want to hijack this. So keep going.
Right. So I wanted to start my own business. I thought it was time to start my own business, and I was moving from Manhattan to Washington, D.C. So I needed to decide what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in food. I knew I wanted to be in Latin American trade. And in marketing in the U.S. I wasn't sure what items to be involved in. So I actually went to back to Harvard Business School and hung out in the library for 2 days, looking at all kinds of statistics and just thinking, just considering, what was it that I want to do? Was it dairy? Was it coffee? Was it meat? Well, it just kept coming back to produce.
Interesting.
And oddly enough, I was visiting and riding bike in Alexandria, Virginia one weekend, and I biked by the United Fresh Fruit and Vegetable headquarters in Alexandria. And this is as I was kind of trying to make these decisions, and I scheduled an appointment for the next week and went in and talked to the director and decided, and that helped my decision making. But basically, I felt that since the market for counter seasonal products from Latin America was really in its infancy, that there was a real opportunity for me to represent growers and use my logistical and sales and marketing skills to represent these growers and bring product, really as directly as possible to the U.S. market, to U.S. retailers. That was my concept.
Right.
And so that's what I did, but I had no experience whatsoever. Louis Dreyfus said they would go in on it with me, and I realized I had no experience whatsoever. So I just started in a spare room in a small little house that my husband had bought on Capitol Hill. And as it happens, it was on the same street as the Florida Street food market. It was down 4th Street. So anybody that saw my address thought I was actually in the market. I wasn't. I was in this little spare room.
Now that market, where is that market? I know there used to be a market right in downtown. I went to it a couple of times when I was working for Teresa, but it's close to Capitol Hill.
Yeah, it's just on the edge of Capitol Hill, and it's kind of gritty. It was meat and produce and various sundry things.
Right.
So I started from this small office, and I needed to learn the trade. I did have a very lucky break, which was that the vice president at Gerber was on the board of a group of executives from packaged food companies that were making microloans to Latin American startups in the food business.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to Victor Moeller, who was the founder of Hortifruit, which is, one of the largest berry groups, which today is called Nature Ripe. Hortifruit still exists, but it's part of the marketing arm in the US is Nature Ripe.
Yeah.
And it really happened that I moved to Washington, D.C. on a Friday in January of '86, and was in Coral Gables, Florida, the very next Monday meeting Victor Moeller. And he was in his first commercial year. And so he needed help on the shipping and marketing. And so within about 2 or 3 weeks, I had established I made my first sale, which was an e-container of raspberries, which were about 32 packages in an e-container to Bilo in South Carolina. That was my first sale, my first customer.
Greenville.
In the raspberry business.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The old e-containers, not old, but
And then the EH containers, which was half of that. And that is how big the berry business was on the import side at that time. It was so small. And that, considering where it's gone, is remarkable.
Yeah, so you certainly were or are a pioneer in the business and pioneering that. So that's congratulations on that. So that from there it took off, or was it a little struggle for a few years?
Slowly but surely, I had to find my way, had to learn. One of the first experiences I had with those raspberries was I had also sold a container to a wholesaler in the DC market. And about after it was shipped and he received it, he said, I need an adjustment. I need to go down. And I said, but why would that be? And he said, well, the market changed. And I had no concept of such a thing. It was kind of a really startling situation.
In your other industry, it was you sell for the price and there you go.
Yes, and we were dealing with, literally shiploads of ferrous metals or what have you. And
Yeah.
so going all over the world.
Right.
So it was really interesting. But it was a good learning curve.
Did you
And
stay with the DC market? Did you branch out into other the into Jessup, into
oh yeah, but in fact, um, at some point, after within the first year, it became clear that the idea of going directly to retailers with these products was risky. And at some point we got an e-container of berries was delivered from Dulles Airport to one of the retailers in the DC area upside down. And at that
Oh,
point,
no.
and not good condition. And at that
Oh,
point, I realized that I really needed my own facility and I needed to be able to look at the product and prepare the product and deliver it. So within about a year, I was able to lease a building in that Florida Avenue market.
okay.
It was a small building that had been a meat packing facility. And lo and behold, it was made available. And I walked in and the hooks were still hanging from the meat.
Oh, for the meat.
What is this? And there were very low ceilings. And it was a very small facility at ground level, wasn't dock height or anything.
Oh, no.
So I needed to get a forklift.
Mhm.
So my first and really only loan was for a Yale forklift, a big yellow forklift, to be able to to unload and unload from the street, which is
Right.
what we were. And I remember, and it was very low ceiling, so those hooks were hanging down. And I remember we had a little part pallet for a customer in Virginia. It was our first order from this new building. And I looked around this teeny building, but it looked like an ocean to me. I was like, how are we going to fill it up? But we did.
And that was all raspberries, or were you starting with some other
No,
berries by
so
then?
blackberries, we started working with a grower in Oak Grove, Virginia, called
Oh,
Westmoreland Berry Farms. They saw our Red Book listing, and once I put it in, and it had berries on it, and we made contact, and I went to the farm, and they had these most terrific blackberries, but they really weren't marketed or packaged for retail. They were in big pints, and they were getting smashed.
yeah.
And the trade really felt that they didn't have any. It was beautiful, but no shelf life.
Right.
Well, what I did was I put them in 6-ounce units, but gave it a farm look in a little like balsa wood container with a little metal rim, like a little copper rim with a little netting on top. And they got pre-cooling equipment. And then we were able to produce a market-ready product that everyone went crazy for.
Wow.
So, and it was tremendous product grown by absolute berry experts who
Yeah.
had worked.
so when you were you had your own warehouse, did you still then did you then go back to retailers, or did you go to wholesale markets?
Mostly to retail. No, we went to retail. We did very little on the wholesale side, and to this day, we do very, very little on wholesale. Our business is primarily to retail at this point, and some food service, larger food service companies.
Yeah.
So we were developing that network, and it was just, filling it out and everything. So we were in blackberries from the very first season as well, basically. And and of course, that's one of our signature products, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a while.
Tell us more about expanding into some of the other berries and products.
Right. Well, I should say at the same time we were getting into the berries with hortifruit, we had started working with a whole variety of specialty products out of Guatemala and really from all over the world. And we also work extensively with the glass house product from the Netherlands.
Oh,
And that would
okay.
be, again, at its infancy. And that was all of the colored peppers. We even had brown and purple,
Wow.
and white, and all the tomatoes and cucumbers the eggplant. We're doing
Okay.
all of the glass house product from the Netherlands. And we became really, I think, the largest single importer into the US. And I'll tell you, I don't know if you want to talk about the tomato on the vine, but in any
Yeah,
case,
definitely.
okay.
Yeah.
So we were working with that, and we're known, we worked with our partners in Holland to the point that the product was harvested and literally put on the plane, and it picked up and put on the plane and got to us within 24 hours pretty much of harvest.
Wow.
So we were known in all our market areas for having absolutely the freshest possible product. I mean, it was really remarkable.
And that-
Unfortunately, 9/11 ended that next day delivery
Oh, right.
situation.
Of course. Yeah.
But
Was that about the time you just started that, or was it much earlier than that? Or
we
earlier than
started that really in 86.
Okay, so
from the
you-
beginning, got
So
into
you were doing tomatoes on the vine in 1986 out of
No,
Holland?
no,
No.
the tomato on the
Oh,
vine,
yeah,
it was a different situation.
right.
And
No, I think I understand now. The 24-hour delivery was, you
Yeah.
started that from the beginning. That was your logistics
Right.
expertise that really played into giving you that advantage. I think.
well, the tomatoes on the vine was
Yeah.
we had we were participating in 1993 at the PMA in Washington, DC. So we had this beautiful booth that looked like a Dutch fruit stand. It had displayed all the different offerings from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And as decoration for the booth, they sent us some tomatoes on the vine. And we hung them from the sides of the booth. It was a metal structure. We hung
Yeah.
them. And as the show progressed, it became kind of a sensation. And this was in 1993. So we'd been
Yeah.
importing since 86 on the Dutch product.
Yeah.
It smelled so incredible, and everybody was like, it's just like out of the garden. Where did this come from? And of course, we asked the same question. So we jumped on that opportunity. The group who had grown that product was really barely commercial. They were harvesting into wooden crates. There was a small group of growers. And we basically worked with them to really make this item a commercial success. And we flew just tremendous quantities of these tomatoes on the vine to the US market. We developed the trade quite quickly, and developed a clamshell container to hold 4 at a time, 4 to 5.
Right.
And also certain kinds of bagging, because it was such a specialty product. It wasn't, sold bulk for quite some years.
Right. So you were one of the very first, or maybe the first, to bring in tomatoes on the vine and to
We were
sell
the
tomatoes.
first.
You were
Absolutely.
the
We
first. Wow.
kind of discovered them, if you will. And
Right.
and it was very exciting. And and I've always had an eye for these kinds of things. And at some point, also way back, I was walking through, a lot of the Dutch product was sold on auctions. So they put them in these
Right.
giant auction floors, and then they would be literally auctioned off with a big clock with the price swinging. And I was walking through an
Those were
auction floor.
descending auctions, weren't they?
Exactly.
Not ascending, but descending, but with the clock. Yeah.
And
Anyway.
I was walking through the auction, and I saw these eggplants, which had little value. They were very small, but I had been very involved in baby squash and baby carrots and baby radishes and all of these different baby products up at, from California as part of our specialty offerings. So I said, well, baby eggplant.
Oh,
And we began to bring this smaller sized Italian eggplant in as a baby eggplant. And it was a great success, to the point where a grower group actually got their, genetic development and bred them to be small instead of just taking the smaller sizes.
sizes.
It's a
Yeah.
small eggplant. And to this day, we import those from
Wow.
Holland and
That's
Spain.
great. Yeah.
And,
What year was that approximately when you started the baby eggplant?
oh gosh, probably 88 or 89.
Okay. We had a produce market in Charlotte for several years, and we used to bring them in. We had a lot of Indian people.
Mm-hmm.
The Hindu temple was right across the street from our produce market, so they love those baby eggplant.
Yeah.
Mostly the Italian variety. Sometimes we'd have to bring in the Japanese
Yeah.
eggplant.
Or the Thai. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. This is very inspirational. I didn't realize how, I knew you were a pioneer in berries, but I did not realize so much in these other commodities. But that's fantastic. So let's talk about, you changed the name of your company. I love the name, Sun Belle. It's a beautiful name. What was the inspiration for that? Where did that come from?
Well, at some point, when we opened the Chicago warehouse in 1991, we were making a brochure, and I got this inspiration to work with sun motifs from like 19th century quilts. Don't ask me how I got that inspiration, but I went to the Chicago Public Library and looked at books of quilts and found different sun motifs, gave them to my graphic designer, and she made this brochure with little wingdings featuring and this one image that were these sun images. And I really liked that. And there was one that was just a little detail item, a little wingding, but I liked that most of all. And in 1993, one of our customers asked us to develop a 3-sleeve pepper, red, yellow, and orange.
Oh, okay.
So we needed a name for that sleeve. Of course, by the way, that was the first use of sleeves on peppers, which now are very prevalent.
Right.
So we looked at those motifs and with the sun, and we decided to come up with this. The name is kind of a play on bell, like bell pepper.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then Belle, Belle, the idea of course, it means beautiful in French.
Right.
And it gives this kind of an idea of imports and quality, and it went perfectly with the sun of the logo of the motif, which we then started using as our logo. So that's how we came up with Sun Belle. It really came from the quilt motifs and a play on bell for bell peppers.
Okay, great.
And we use that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You
please.
live in Chicago?
Yes, I do.
And how did you end up there?
Well, I'm from Chicago originally, from the suburbs. And when we were importing all these peppers and beefsteak tomatoes and other things from Holland, we were importing for Jewel food stores directly. And at some point, the buyer said, if you have a location in Chicago, we can get exactly what we want when we want it, instead of forming this to 6 pallet shipments or what have you. And I didn't need too much more prompting. So that's how I ended up starting in Chicago, and moved in and it had to then look for a building to operate from as well.
And are you actually from the city of Chicago yourself?
No, from Highland Park. It's a suburb
Park.
about 25 miles north.
Do you have Mexican berries?
Yes, we have an enormous number of Mexican berries. Yeah, we do. The full, we do all our blacks from there during the import season, our raz from there, a really large quantity of blueberries and organics and all as well, and then strawberries.
You mentioned your North Carolina blackberry grower. Other than, do you source from any other grower in the United States?
Yes, we work year round.
Growers?
So we work with all the domestic growing areas. So on blueberries, we'll be starting soon out of Florida. Then we move to Georgia, North Carolina, New Jersey, Mississippi, Michigan, California to some extent, of course, then Oregon, Washington State, and BC. So we're pretty much moving all over the country. And then on blackberries, we do a lot of work out of Georgia and Arkansas, some out of North Carolina as well. So, and then on raspberries, we do some work out of California, and and then we also have a product from Baja California, which is Mexico, during the summer months as well. And then we work with cranberries, organic cranberries.
Oh, really? Interesting. Where do they come from?
From Wisconsin.
Okay. But the largest producer, Wisconsin.
Yeah. I have a funny story, because when I first met the grower, their bogs or marshes are fed by natural springs. Oh. And he said, come canoeing with me. So he had this canoe, and I canoed with him. Fortunately, I just learned how to canoe. And we canoed on the spring, and he said at the end, he said, we canoe very well together. He said, that was very important. I needed to know I could work with you.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
Which grower is it?
The name is Nakusa.
Okay.
Nakusa Farms. And
And
it's
what-
all organic. It's
what
not
town
only
are they
organic,
in?
biodynamic.
What town are they in?
It's near Wisconsin. I think it's near Wisconsin Rapids. It's in Nakusa, this little hamlet area.
Yeah.
Hope
Does
I-
I
that
live in
name ring a-
Minnesota, so it's not too far from where I live.
Oh, you're in Wisconsin?
No, I live in Duluth, Minnesota.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not too far from the growing area there.
And that name didn't ring a bell to you, Rick or Teresa? Nakusa?
No, we knew Habelmans from Wisconsin.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did marketing work for them as well. And of course, Teresa's husband, Jim Nolan, was the director of sales for them for many, many years. So we know that business pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you must have a lot of interesting, amusing, and funny stories about your experiences over the years. Can you relate one or two that stand out most in your memory?
So when after a search for real estate or building to operate out of in Chicago in the early 90s, we found a 4-story building with a basement right in the West Loop area on the Fulton Market. It had been built in 1893 for a meat company.
Another meat company.
And later that's a theme, isn't it? And
Yeah.
later was the distribution center for one of the early supermarkets. I believe it was called National Tea.
Oh, yes. I remember them.
And it still had cork insulation throughout.
Oh, wow.
It's just unbelievable. It had refrigeration on just about every floor, including the basement. And it had this old freight elevator that I think was, if not original to 1893, was probably from the early 1900s. And I showed it to my father just before we bought it, and he just couldn't believe it. He said, "This is a lean-to. This is no better than a lean-to." But I went ahead anyway, original freight elevator and all.
Yeah.
And it proved to be an incredible space until we outgrew it. But the most amazing thing about this building was that Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus brought their freight train to the railroad siding next to our building every year when they came to Chicago, and they would unload the freight cars, and the elephants they would have a parade to the United Center, which was pretty much just to the west. And they would unload the animals, and the elephants would walk with, holding the elephant in front of that one's tail, and they would parade to the United Center. And it was just kind of magical, also weird because we were kind of in a meat market. But it was so much fun to see that. And then another part of this story is that that there's been tremendous development in the West Loop area, and including legal headquarters, and McDonald's actually relocated from Oak Brook to this area, and it's just full of giant buildings. But this building is still there because it looks like the lean-to is now attributed to the famous architects Adler and Sullivan, and it has landmark preservation status.
Wow.
It is.
Oh, that's outstanding.
It's so remarkable. And just yesterday, I was looking at an online version of Crane's Chicago, and they had, I guess the last parcel of land is this parking lot that was directly across from us that was owned by Neely Foods, which is another meat company. And it's like the only part, it's the last parcel left for development. I think they said it was like 2-3 acres. It's going to be, was it $100 or $200 million for this land. And there was our building in all its glory, fully exposed.
Great.
Anything with this thing.
I actually thought you were going to tell a story that Geraldo Rivera broke into the safe in that building or something.
There was a safe in the building.
Was
buildings like that.
Al Capone's vault was not in
That's
that
right. It's that area. It's that
it is in that area
district, which has now been transformed.
Yeah.
To,
Has it become residential section?
It's becoming, it is now. It is, but it's really quite incredible, but there's like no parking, so I don't know what they're gonna do with it. But,
Right. Very good.
another
right.
story is that I was visiting, we began to export our blackberries from Mexico, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, the Tupi variety. We were exporting, and still are, our blackberries from Mexico to all over Europe, and I was visiting an Italian customer who's located in the Dolomite Mountains in northern Italy.
Yeah,
They
beautiful there.
use altitude for their seasonality. The higher the altitude, the later the season.
Right.
And they took me to their test plot, and I tried one of their raspberry selections at this test plot and had an absolute aha moment. It was so
Wow.
great. And so I kind of went about obtaining the licensing agreement to produce and market this raspberry in the Americas. And that was really our introduction, or our way to begin raspberry production in Mexico.
Oh, so, but that, now let me make sure I understand this, because I'm not sure I followed exactly. The raspberries were developed in the Dolomites or the Dolomites.
Well, yes, they had their own genetic program.
Okay, and you took them to Mexico to there. Okay,
And
and
adapted them.
did you have to grow them in higher elevations in Mexico?
Fairly high, not absolutely, but it
Yeah.
is kind of high generally there because everything's
Right.
on a high plane.
Yeah, Mexico City is what, 7,500 feet or something, I believe.
Yeah, it's very
Something
high.
like that, very high. Yeah. Well, that's great. I've been to the Dolomites. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, but I didn't realize they were developing berries there. So there's something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention our work with the Tupi blackberries and just the development of the blackberry industry.
Yeah, please.
Do you have time? Do you have time?
Yeah, if you have time, we have time.
Okay. So basically, I mentioned the work with Westmoreland from the very beginning on blackberries, and when we changed the name to Sun Belle and established our partners as Sun Belle Mexico in Mexico, and in 2002, in that very first year, I realized that there was a variety that we were receiving in very small quantities that was superior to the rest, and that was the Tupi blackberry. It's a Brazilian variety that had just been introduced to Mexico, and I felt that it really could catapult the blackberry industry. There was the varieties that were being used did not hold up at all, and they weren't very good. And the blackberry industry was really teeny for Mexico at that time. I mean, even the year before, we had been flying, not even trucking, and then we were trucking pallets.
Right.
And so basically, we asked our partner, we pointed this out to our partners and asked if we could really, get other growers involved in this new variety Tupi, which is Tupy.
Okay.
And they agreed, and we developed this industry in Mexico from just this very small base to a very, very large base. And eventually everyone else followed with the Tupi, and now we're beyond the Tupi with our other varieties. But it really was allowed the industry to develop, and we were able to introduce the blackberry to the club stores like Costco and Sam's. We were able to put them in larger packages, 12 ounce, 18 ounce. So we developed all that packaging and really helped grow that industry. And it's a substantial industry today.
And like the blueberries I mentioned, what's happened, and I did not realize you were at the forefront of that. I'm not surprised after all we've heard, but the blackberries coming out of Mexico just have blown my mind. They're big, the sweetest berries you can get. So, and that's primarily started with this Tupi variety. Is that true? Yeah.
And
do you have?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Do you have patents on your varieties?
Yes, when they are proprietary, absolutely. And not only that, we then patent them all over the world and keep all those patents and registrations going.
That's great. And I didn't realize until today that you were exporting into Europe. I think I mostly seen, I was aware of your North American business, but apparently you have a pretty strong business going into Europe, not just out of Holland, but into Europe.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, very good. So tell us about goldenberries. This has been a recent find for me, and 2 or 3 years ago, I think it's the first time I tried them. And it was at your booth at PMA, what was then called PMA, where I first tried them and just went over the moon. Tell our listeners.
Oh my gosh, I was dragged from place to place. Had to get them, had to get them, had to get them.
Well, that's been really fun because I just love introducing new products and varieties. And basically, I was familiar with this product from Europe, from all my European travels, and both exporting from Europe and importing to Europe then with the blackberries and they were coming from Colombia, but they weren't allowed in the US.
Oh,
So
really?
no, they could only be brought in if they were irradiated, and there was just some coming, a little bit coming from Thailand, I believe, that were irradiated, and that was not something that we were interested in.
Yeah.
But I knew they were coming from Colombia, and the USDA allowed them under certain with certain provisions for the growers and under specialized provisions. And so we immediately went and found the grower that could work with us and do the job and had the permissions. And we've been growing ever since. So we established the item from nothing, basically from nothing in the US. And it's really become a very interesting growing product. It's quite unique. As you know, it is, in fact, it's technically not a berry. It actually is a cousin to the tomatillo.
All right. Right.
And it actually comes in a husk,
Like
like
the
the
tomatillo.
tomatillo does.
Right.
But but it has just a totally different flavor profile.
Right.
So it's basically in the tomato family. But it's this combination of tropical and tart, sweet, just really a lot of flavors in this product.
Yeah. Yeah, it is complex. It's the
Yes.
complex flavors profile. And what was the original name for them? They were not called goldenberries. They were.
Oh, there's many names.
Okay.
That's called uchuva,
Okay.
and Cape gooseberries. Although
Okay, that's the one I was remembering.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
the
remember.
Cape gooseberry. It's not because of the cape, but it does have a cape. It has this little
Right.
covering, but it was at some point grown in South Africa, so they called it Cape gooseberry.
Okay.
And it's also called physalis. That's
Physalis.
the Latin name, Physalis
Latin name,
peruviana. And it's grown in Colombia. It can be grown elsewhere, but it is grown mostly there commercially. And it's grown we import it 52 weeks a year. So it's
really?
steady production.
So it's a year-round product
Yes.
from the same region.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's growing in the highlands of Colombia.
Okay. That's interesting. It's very few things that can grow year-round like that, aren't there? But I guess that makes sense, because if it's more in the tomato family, if you have the right climate, you can grow tomatoes year-round for sure. So the tomatillos.
Are any of them grown in greenhouses, or are they grown in the fields?
They're grown in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Very
And what-
beautiful fields. It's really remarkable.
Is it a tree? Is it a bush? What is it?
No, it's a small plant. And it looks so cool with its little covering, I'll
Right.
send you a picture too.
Well, what's on the horizon? Are you might, I don't want you to give away trade secrets here, but I'm very curious if you're still searching for some new things out there. I'm
Oh,
sure you are.
always. We our partners in Mexico and ourselves are very involved in varietal development.
Okay.
And in fact, at this moment, we're presenting, our major raspberry is a proprietary variety called Malu, and the blackberries are varieties called Acatzali and Amalali from Mexico.
Oh, wow. That's a
So
mouthful.
we're really devoted. Yeah, we're really devoted to varietal development on
Right.
all the berry varieties. And
you're doing a great job there. I was at the produce marketing event. It's got a different name now, but when we were at your booth there, I was sampling those blueberries. They were, first of all, they're huge, but just unbelievably sweet. Some of the sweetest berries I've ever tasted. And the fact that even though they're, a lot of times when blueberries get that large, they get mushy, but not Sun Belle's. They were as crisp as they could be still. So that's amazing.
that's what we really strive for. We really need to deliver consistent high quality to our customers day in,
Yeah.
day out.
Right.
And of course, variety is the foundation of that. And then the way we're handling the product, the logistics, and our own work in our operations and our warehouse operations is key in our deliveries. And by the way, we have 5 from our the little baby meat place in DC. We have 5 distribution centers now.
Where are those? Yeah.
They are in Jessup, Maryland, which is
Right.
the outgrowth of the original DC. That's about 65,000 square feet. In Schiller Park, Illinois, which is our Chicago base, it's about
Yeah.
54,000. Then we've 85,000 in Miami, and about 20,000 in Oxnard, California, square feet.
Okay.
And then our latest addition is a facility in Laredo, Texas, which is doing all our transloads from Mexico, and basically bringing the product in and then redistributing to all our different distribution centers in the right quantities every day, and the right items. And also they act as a Southwest distribution center.
This consistency, what I've seen from Sun Belle, every time I've bought your products or tasted them at the shows, they are consistent, which is a tough thing because fruits and vegetables are not widgets. You can't just set the machine, the assembly line up and churn it out the same quality one after the other. What are the challenges you face there in that consistency, keeping the consistency? I know you've talked a little bit about, first of all, the varieties and then the handling.
Right.
What are some of the other challenges you face?
Well, weather.
All right.
Weather is, of course, an enormous factor now. And we can see that over the last 10 years, how it's kind of escalated in importance.
Right.
So of course, if it's a constant deluge in a growing area, the product will suffer no matter how great it is. So that is an ongoing issue. We have very stable workforce, but of course labor is always an issue, and it became quite an issue during the pandemic.
Right. Every industry really was impacted by the pandemic and the supply chain issues, but with produce, it's exponential in those situations, it seems to me. But yet inflation wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to get. And it seems like all of you did a wonderful job keeping produce on the shelves at an affordable price.
It was challenging for sure, but I mean, we were designated a frontline industry, needed to keep operating, and we just let our people know that we needed to keep operating and they needed to come to work, and they did.
Right.
And so we really didn't have any issues of that sort. I mean, there were some people that needed to stay home and take their kids at some point, especially in the Miami area. But in general, it was quite tremendous, the response of our team.
Yeah.
And we just kept operating, and we just did our job. And,
right.
That's the best. You have to do that in produce.
Yeah.
We never shut down for a day, and we never dropped a beat. So it worked out.
Well, if you've got a little bit more time, I've got some questions that are off produce.
Okay.
Once I've learned a little bit about you. First of all, I'm a big music fan, and I read that you are a classical music fan and are involved prominently in the Chicago musical community. And tell me about that, and what are you doing there in Chicago?
Well, I was really born into it.
Oh, okay.
My mother is a concert pianist.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And my father, the businessman, studied composition and played several instruments.
Wow.
So in fact, they met because he attended a recital she gave when she came back from conservatory, from Eastman Conservatory during her first year, after her freshman year, and he was just smitten from the audience. So they married, and I just grew up in a house full of music. We all played instruments. We played together. It was kind of incredible. My brother Steve is a fabulous cellist, and he's a member of the National Symphony in Washington, and has been for many years. My other brother, Bob, was a wonderful violinist, and to this day plays violin and guitar in all kinds, and for fun, in all kinds of bands, every kind of music, even including country
Wow.
western. And So my mother's been artistic director of a chamber music group called the Pilgrim Chamber Players for 25 years. And now my brother Steve has taken it over as artistic director, which has been a very nice transition to watch in the last year.
Wow, that is fabulous. What instruments do you play?
I played clarinet and a little piano, but I haven't played in a very long time.
You don't have time, I don't think.
I don't have time. I think I could, but yeah, but I'm a music lover and I love attending Chicago Symphony Orchestra concerts and recitals.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. I've been in the Opera House there once.
Sure.
Years ago, but it was quite an experience. So,
I think that may be the same same architects.
that's a beautiful building.
That building.
Yeah, it is a beautiful building. So okay, I'm also I didn't send this question ahead to you, Janice, but I was intrigued to learn that you studied philosophy, and I consider myself an amateur not a philosopher, but I'm an amateur student of philosophy. Did studying philosophy help you in your business career and life, do you think? How did that?
So it was during the time when existentialism was really in the forefront, and I kind of took the psychology track of philosophy, and I think it was very, very determining, for me, and it just contributed to my approach to life and decision making and risk taking. Yeah. So, and of course, Latin American studies I loved, and I even integrated them to some extent. So,
oh wow. I worked just kind of peripherally. I have a good friend who made a documentary about Simon Bolivar a few years ago, and I helped him on some aspects of it. I wasn't tremendously involved, but it was a pretty good documentary. So I'm sure you know a lot about Simon Bolivar. He was a very interesting person.
Yeah.
And very instrumental in liberating the South American countries.
Yeah. Well, being in Caracas in Venezuela.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. That's where he was from.
Yes.
Right. Well, this has been fun. I don't want it to end, but
wait. What about the pun?
We're gonna get there.
Oh,
okay. I was gonna say you elbowed your way in and
I'm
ignored poor Teresa.
Is it like a riddle or it's more?
Well, it's usually a question, and we try to guess the pun, but we usually don't get it. But so you have to. But here's the rule. The rule is, Janice, that you can't laugh at it. You got to groan at it. That's why we call it home grown. But I'm going to introduce it, and then she'll ask the question, and then we'll get a chance to guess and see if we can figure it out. So here we go. Okay, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, it's time for your favorite segment on the Produce Buzzers podcast. Yes, it's time for home grown. No, don't run away. Don't go away. You have to stay and get punished with one of Teresa's homegrown puns. So, Teresa, what is the homegrown of the day?
Okay, so Janice was talking about greenhouses, and I wonder if you know what the greenhouse grower said he learned after he was arrested for smoking marijuana in his greenhouse.
Okay, now the greenhouse grower, what he learned?
Yes.
After he was
arrested.
For growing or smoking marijuana in his greenhouse.
Yes.
What did he learn? This has something to do with the glass house, but I don't know what.
Yeah, it captured the evidence.
Any other guesses?
He learned that his operation was going to pot.
Oh, well done.
Pretty good, but not the answer I was looking for.
Oh, no.
If you live in a glass house, don't get stoned.
There you go.
Was that it? Did I get it?
Well,
People in glass houses shouldn't get stoned.
That is very good. Very good.
We didn't groan.
because I'm flabbergasted that you got one.
That's amazing. Yeah, I rarely get them. That was when that's
Yeah,
why I had to learn.
I remember there was a lawsuit when somebody's glass house was, a golf course in Holland was built next to these glass houses. And golf
Oh.
balls were going through.
Oh man.
Oh,
There are all
dear.
kinds of lawsuits going on there. So very appropriate.
Uh,
Are
That's
you getting
funny.
into the marijuana business at all, or?
No, I think we'll stick to berries.
Um,
How about mushrooms? They are all the rage now.
They are, but we'll stick to berries.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I'm very-
Congress is going to consider legalizing marijuana tomorrow.
is it tomorrow they do it?
Yeah, they're having a joint session tomorrow.
A joint session. Okay, we've punished you enough, Janice. Thank you for enduring it and being a guest. It was fascinating, really
Well,
fascinating.
thank you again. It's been fun. I appreciate
Yeah.
your invitation.
Congratulations on all you've
you.
accomplished and
Thank you very
much
much.
more to do.
It was a lot of fun.
Great.
I love the
Thank you
fun.
so much.
Okay, bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Janice. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Produce Buzzers podcast, brought to you by Produce Buzz, the gathering place for lovers of fresh fruits and veggies. We hope you were entertained a bit and educated a lot about fresh produce. Be sure to join us next time, and please tell your friends to do so as well. Like, share, and comment on our Produce Buzz Facebook page. And check out our website at www.producebuzz.com. There you will find articles about fresh fruits and veggies, how to select, store, and prepare them, as well as lots of interesting facts about all the wonderful bounty the earth provides for us. Until next time, be fruitful and don't forget to veg out.